I'm Carole Taylor. On this episode of Journal, I ask an important question. Would you ever run for politics? And if not, why not? Would you ever encourage your children to join the public service? I know polls tell us that politicians are held in low esteem. The Intl trust ratings put them near the bottom of professions the public trusts. And a recent poll by Innovation Research Group found that 30% of British Columbians describe themselves as alienated voters, supposedly angry at the system. And yet the success of our country, our community, depends on the leaders we elect. It depends on their values, their talent, and experience. So how do we convince more good people to participate? You know, when I grew up, the idea of public service was honored. Personally, while I never wanted a lifelong career in government, I always felt that somewhere along the way, I had a responsibility to serve in some way. I look back and I value my time in municipal politics and then many years later in provincial. When I was Minister of Finance, I was blessed to work with Tamara Vrooman. She was my deputy minister and, in my opinion, the best in the business. The teamwork that resulted meant that good public policy solutions were often found by building off of each other's ideas and experience. Politicians working hand in hand with an excellent public service. I've asked Tamara, who is currently CEO of Vancouver International Airport, to join me in a discussion about what changes in our political system could make a difference and encourage more people to come forward and run for election. Admittedly, it's not an easy task. Back in a moment with Tamara Vrooman. Welcome back. And Tamara, so good to have you with us today for this discussion because it's something we sort of know in our bones. So let's go straight to it. Why are so many people saying, are you kidding? I wouldn't go near politics. I'd never run for politics.
Yeah, it's not very encouraging, is it, Carole?
No.
What we see in terms of really good people from diverse backgrounds just saying no. And I think the reason is it's a very, very difficult time to be in public office. It's not only the public scrutiny, I think it's the kind of issues, there's safety, there's security, not only for yourself, but your family. It seems very, very difficult to make progress on things. The world is changing, so there's complexity. And there's a whole party system that makes it difficult to go from A to B in a straight line or on any kind of time frame that would be reasonable, I think, in people's lives and people's careers. So for a whole pile of reasons, many people are saying, I just don't think this is for me. And as a result, we have fewer and fewer people to choose from.
And so let's take those one by one. So the security issue, safety issue, I think is top of mind for a lot of people. I noticed that just recently 2 Ontario politicians, women, have stepped away, and they very publicly said the reason is the threats they were getting, rude comments, and they just didn't want that kind of life. So can we put all the blame on social media?
I don't think it's entirely on social media, but social media certainly doesn't help. It allows people to mobilize in ways and communicate in ways for good, but often for harm. Particularly against public figures. Because public figures are a bit anonymous, they're public, but they're away from us, they can encourage people to mobilize around them in ways that are very, very unsafe. We also saw the MLA in Alberta just yesterday also announced that she won't be running again because of the threats of personal safety, including threats from the police. So it's very serious.
Yeah, and it's all sped up because when I was first in the public eye many, many years ago, I would get letters that were very nasty. But I mean, there were letters, it was slow mail, and it was sort of something you could take and put aside or hand to the police or whatever. But social media is just constant, and it's right in your face, and everybody sees it, and then it gets spread around so fast.
I think it's not only the speed, although that's definitely an issue, but it's also the breadth. So people from far and wide can latch on to a very small issue, or you can connect with a very small percentage that can be mobilized very, very quickly. And so I do think it's very, very difficult to have the kind of security, not only for oneself, but for your constituency staff, for your political staff, for your communication staff, and ultimately for your family. So I think people have had security, as you know, at their private homes. There's been protests and acts of violence at people's personal residence. We didn't used to see that 10 and 20 years ago.
So what can be done about it? Because if that's the big cloud that's hanging over everything, it's got to be approached.
It's certainly something that I know a lot of people are thinking about. It has no easy answer, which is what makes it so confounding. I do think talking about it more is important. Being a little bit less naive about the security realities, which of course then removes people from community, thickens the distance between people who are elected and the people they serve. And so there needs to be other ways that they find to connect, make sure they're in touch with the issues and with the people that they serve. But I do think that a more sophisticated approach to security, also greater discussion about it, greater services to protect people. It's unfortunate, but I think we're quite naive to just think it's going to go away on its own.
And another part of it, and I blame the media for this in part, but also the political parties, is that they now do this scouring of everything in your past.
Right.
And they have the ability to go back. And people say to me that there's no one out there who's perfect. And if you're telling me that you've never made a mistake in your life or you've never done something that was silly or whatever, I don't know that person. And so they don't want to expose their families to that kind of abuse. And so the backroom guys in politics, that's what they do during the campaign. They've got a war room just looking at every candidate of the opposition, trying to find something. And then the media very helpfully puts it on the front page of the paper.
Or on the front page of the media feed that changes minute by minute, right? And so I do think that the bringing out everything in people's past is something that's with us for a long time, though. And so maybe there's an opportunity, of people who are elected aren't perfect. That's why we elect them. They reflect us, who also is not perfect. And so are there ways that we can put things into context, things that matter and things that don't, in order that we can move on? I'm not sure, though, Carole, that it's possible to put the genie back in the bottle. And so we have this very public context. We have less security. How do we encourage people to navigate that with confidence, give them some tools to talk about those things and some real tools to protect themselves and their families versus hoping that it will go backwards? I personally look forward to the day when we have more conversation leads to more perspective. I do think that part of the problem is certain people just don't engage at all. And so we do get a very narrow band of voices that come through social media and through public scrutiny. That's the other problem. It's not actually reflective of the full public. It's a very, very small percentage getting an amplified voice on whatever the issue.
And I know that we're all concentrating on diversity, and that usually means gender, multicultural. And one thing I'm thinking about is we're not getting the diversity in experience. If you look at the federal government and the provincial, you'd be hard-pressed to find more than a couple of people who have run businesses, for instance. And yet there they are making public policy at the tax level or public policy issues that affects every business in the country. And where are the voices at the table that say, hey, that's not a smart thing to do?
No, I think politics really has a pretty significant sort of brand and growth problem, if I put it in business terms. You know, what we see with successful business people, whether they're entrepreneurs, whether they're in entertainment or even in sports or have led major companies, what they do when they want to give back is they start foundations and they give back directly. In the past, that wouldn't have been the case. We would have seen more people from the business community saying the way I'm going to give back is public service. We don't see that anymore because the pathway to creating your own foundation and directly supporting things that you care about is much, much simpler than the pathway to public service. Yet, I think we need public service more than ever.
It was interesting to see Polyev going after lobbyists in the business community, saying, I don't want to see you guys. Like, if you think a policy is wrong, speak up. Don't talk to me privately. Get out there, because if the community or public is not with you, the politicians aren't going to do it. Politicians are followers in many ways. Mm-hmm. So speak up as business people, but they're reluctant to, because then their businesses may get targeted.
Right, and that's an interesting point of view, because the politics and the public arena used to be the place where those things were debated. And they were debated as part of public policy, and so you'd have a business point of view, you might have a civil society point of view, you'd have a local point of view. But it sounds like what the opposition leader is saying, well, no, we want those to be held in their own forums, and then bring the solution to me once the public is on side. That's actually quite a different description of what public debate and policy debate historically has been.
Well, one of the things you mentioned is party rules, the sort of inner workings of politics. And it used to grate me when I was told, because you're part of a party, this is how you think, this is how you act, this is what you say, and you leave your independence at the door. I don't like that. So we'll talk about that after this break. We're back with Tamara Vrooman, and now we get into the nitty-gritty of politics. You mentioned it in a very interesting way, that people who haven't been involved really don't know how to navigate the system.
No, it's a completely a black box. How do you go from somebody who might be interested in putting their name forward to actually having your name on a ballot? Most people don't know how to do that, or even where to start to get information. And once they do start, they find that the process can take years, months, and it's not transparent or easy to navigate.
And not welcoming, except when somebody's running for the leadership, and then, oh my gosh, do we sign up memberships?
Yeah, indeed. That's a process I think that's come under some scrutiny in many, many jurisdictions in our country, that you can sign up new members, and those new members then have eligibility to vote in a leadership convention and race, even though they may have been members for only a very short period of time, relatively speaking.
Well, the parliamentary committee that's been looking at foreign interference made as one of their recommendations that the whole system of nominations and party leadership conventions be put under Elections Canada, because right now it's unregulated.
It's an interesting idea, isn't it? That there would be some kind of order and consistency across parties. The other thing is, different parties have different rules of working in different ways, and of course, you want to reflect the membership, but probably not in the way that they operate, because that is the way that, of course, leads ultimately to governing. And so there should be some transparency and consistency. I would agree with that. Because
those nominations can be played with. I mean, I was the victim of that at one time, decide to run for municipal politics, and, just one of a slate of people that puts their name forward. And lo and behold, at the nomination meeting, a few busloads of people showed up before the meeting was called, before anybody was there, stuffed the ballot boxes and did it alphabetically. I was Taylor, way down at the bottom, right? And so I got booted off of the ballot. And I can remember very clearly afterwards people saying, oh, Carole, don't say anything, like that. This is the way politics works. And I took a day or two and I thought, I was only running to change politics.
Right.
And if this is what the old network does, well, let's highlight it. And so kept running and managed somehow to win. But it was right in my face that that's how some nominations work. Special interests can take over. And so the general public doesn't really get a choice in their politicians the way we think democracy works. You get what insiders have chosen, and then you get to have a pick.
That's right, and that whole process is quite opaque, to your point, and in some cases can be subject to manipulation. And increasingly, that manipulation isn't just local, right? It's foreign and it's nefarious. And so, how do we ensure that there is transparency and consistency? I think the Elections Act idea is an interesting one.
Yeah, and so that might be a first step. It's obviously not going to solve everything. But I also think, as you said before, the more we talk about these things, the more the general public realizes, I think the more concern there will be about that.
It's interesting. I often talk, given my financial background, about the need to educate for financial literacy and math in schools. What about civics? What happened to civics? Do we teach that in schools? Do young people know how it works? Is there a basic level? What's more important in our country than the way it's governed in terms of the future that we create together? Yet we provide no basic tools in order to educate citizens. Particularly, we could educate them on how to navigate social media and elections. We could educate them into how the system works so they could be thinking about it at an early age in the same way we educate about science, literature, mathematics, or history.
You are very passionate about public service, and you started your career and had a magnificent career in public service. Why do you think it's so important?
There's not very many things that happen in our lives that don't at some point involve public service and government. And as they say, a change in the law is a change in the future. And so when we think about our futures, we don't want government and public service to be a part of our everyday lives all the time. But we do want a context, a set of rules, people who are thinking about the future of the country in ways that can help individuals thrive and prosper. And I think if we don't pay attention to it, if we dismiss it, if we're always speaking negatively of it, if we sort of foul the nest, if you like, of public service, we can't be that surprised that nobody wants to be in that nest. And so there is, I also think, a need to talk about what's good in public service, to encourage the people who are trying to do the right thing despite the odds, to support them, even if we don't agree with them, because we need that. You look at countries that not so long ago were open, free democracies that aren't anymore, and we think, oh, that can't happen here. I'm not so sure.
And so how many of your friends or colleagues are saying to their kids, I want you to grow up and have a career in public service?
Yeah, very, very few. Very, very few. And that's because, as we said earlier, there's some real concerns about safety and security. But I think increasingly it's also, we tear it down at every opportunity. Every microscopic point is dissected and torn apart. Who would want to subject themselves to that? There is a need to talk about it more, to educate more, to make it more transparent, but also to celebrate the places of success. And I think there are places of real success, and they're not left or right or green or brown. They're just good for the future of the country. And we need to talk a lot more about those.
We had some good experiences. I remember one when I was just first Minister of Finance, so as green as you can get. And you and I were working over the summer on an emergency budget because before the election, a budget hadn't been passed. So it had to be done quickly, but everybody else was on holidays. Right. And we found that it looked like we were going to have a bit of surplus. Mm-hmm. And I remember saying to you, okay, can you tell me what we could do for low-income seniors? And you went away and very shortly came back with this page, and it said, we could do this, it costs this much, it would help this many seniors. Or we could do this, it costs this much, we could do this. And it was magnificent. Now, that was public service work that laid it out. And I thought, okay, well, this is the one we can afford. This is the one we did. Put it in the budget.
That's right. That's right. And so there's not very many places in one's working life where you can affect, ideally, in the case of British Columbia, the lives of 4 million plus people with the decisions you make. Now, of course, you can also affect them negatively. And so therefore, that's why we need people with diverse experience, with different points of view, feeling free to debate the merits, good and bad, left, right, up, down, in order to get the best possible option going forward. These aren't simple issues. If they were, they'd be solved. And so they really do require diversity of opinion, experts who can weigh in, and enough space, patience, and care, frankly, for those debates to be had thoughtfully so we can make good decisions for our future.
You've been the ideal public servant, senior deputy minister of finance. You went into public service for a reason, and then you left public service. What was the reason?
I went into public service for the reason that you said, fully believed that it was the place where you could have the greatest effect on the future, very future focused. I left public service because I felt that it increasingly wasn't a place where you could do that, and that in the case of banking, the allocation of finance can set the future. So that's why I went there.
Well, we're all hoping that you'll come back in any way you want to public service. Tamara Vrooman, we'll be right back. I know it is a difficult task in our current environment to ask someone to leave their private life and dedicate it to politics. They worry about the effect on their family, both in time away and exposure to endless criticism. However, if we as a society don't find a way to make being a politician or a public servant a respected, honorable, and appreciated career, then we're all the losers. Let me know your thoughts. Till next time, I'm Carole Taylor.